Hello and welcome to this sixth edition of Vicforum 2021, produced by Polaron Language Services. Now, we don't have a crystal ball, but today we are going to be looking into the future of communication in a post-pandemic world. I'm Michael Loader and I'll be your host for today's delightful Discord. I'd like to begin our forum by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. Now, earlier, I managed to catch up with Miss Sheena Watt, a member of the Northern Metropolitan Region and Labor's first female Indigenous state MP. A Yorta woman, Sheena joins us and is representing the Minister for Multicultural Affairs, Ross Spence.
For the future, informed by the Victorian community very much, and one that was a long time coming, that it would be remiss of me not to mention, was the decriminalisation of public drunkenness, and that was a really big debate and one that has been long called for by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities here in Victoria and indeed nationally. And we know that that law was unfairly discriminating against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, as well as Sudanese and South Sudanese Victorians, and we just couldn't have that anymore. So they're three things that kind of immediately come to mind, but there's just been so much more in it. Of course, I have now worked out how to get the printer working and all of the other things, but they're the big ones for my first 5 months.
Fantastic.
So, yeah,
That's quite a list for starting off. That's fantastic. So what are some of the unique perspectives you're bringing to the table in Victoria, given your extensive background in health and community sectors? So you listed those things, but what are some of the things you're bringing?
Yeah, it's interesting that, because I have been a community activist and a community leader for a really long time. I've been involved in community organisations for over 10 years, including most recently at a youth employment service, working with public housing tenants and providing opportunity for employment for young people in public housing, as well as partnering with the Centre for Multicultural Youth, a really important Victorian organisation to unlock opportunities for jobs for young people from multicultural backgrounds. So I'm How was that
affected during COVID? I mean, that's people were losing their jobs left, right, and centre. So how did
all over the place?
Yeah,
and it was a challenging time. I spent COVID, working to make sure that employers right around the country kept their commitments to young people, particularly to multicultural and Indigenous young people. We work really hard with business and industry, and I, previously worked really hard with business and industry to unlock these opportunities, and I just didn't want to see them go. I'm really proud of the fact that, every Aboriginal person that I worked with maintained their job during COVID. I'm really, really proud of that. When I think about other perspectives, of course, there's my experience with youth employment, but at the same time, I've been a member of the board of some of Victoria's peak bodies on community health, women's health, and social services, including the Victorian Council of Social Services, Women's Health Victoria, and my local community health service, Merry Health, which I know did just so very much during COVID, including some pop-up clinics and all sorts of things to ensure that our community was safe. So
it's so important, and I love hearing this. I'm so excited by the fact that you've been doing all this work, because it's not an easy gig, to say the least. But what do you think could be done further, sort of to amplify the voices of multicultural people and of course the Indigenous community as well? We want to amplify those voices so they can be heard.
Look, we learnt a lot during COVID. I think that talking to Ross Spence as I do, and she, of course, is a very unfortunate apology today, but I'm happy to be here on her behalf. She mentioned all the incredible work that was done with community leaders during COVID, and we sat back and thought, what is it out of that we can take the silver lining of COVID and make better for the community in Victoria? And so that's why the most recent state budget in 2021 had some really good initiatives, including making sure that our facilities that multicultural communities and multi-faith communities enjoy are really fit for purpose, and so there was a $21 million announcement to upgrade some of those really important community facilities. Of course, continuing on that commitment to employment that I have so strongly is a $13 million commitment to breaking down employment barriers for people from multicultural communities. And the last one I just want to talk about is more money for Migrant Workers Centre, which is such an important organisation, making sure that multicultural workers and migrant workers right around Victoria are protected and have some place to go for advice, and also to chase up wage theft, which was happening a little bit too much across our state. So there was, there was just all over the place some really, really good initiatives, and I am.
Fantastic.
I'm really proud that we learned a lot and making it work. And it's been a nice thing to work with the multicultural community in Victoria over the last 5 months and be a part of it.
I want to move on to your lived experience of being a carer now, if I may.
Yes.
And it gave you some strong views on access to public health. You mentioned a few things just there.
Being a young carer, and that's in fact my caring experience started when I was 13 and my father was struck with a lifelong disability. I learnt a lot about the need for strong, robust community services and why people that are experiencing vulnerability or disadvantage really do need a strong social services sector. My family relied on the goodwill of organisations in our local community, but they can only do that if supported by good government, and I'm really grateful that happened for me. This week I met with an organisation that supports other young carers, and I know that the battle for equality of opportunity for young carers is still ongoing, and there's been a range of initiatives supported by our Minister in that space, Luke Donnellan. So the fact that we have a Victorian Minister for Carers, I think, speaks volumes to the commitment that Victoria has for carers. And I'm just, pretty proud of that, I've got to say. And I think that there's of course more to do, but I think Victorian government is only more strengthened by having people with lived experience all over the place, not just the lived experiences that I have, but across my colleagues of the needs in our community and the real, lived experience of how tough it can be. And I'm very grateful.
And especially for a child to have to step up to that responsibility.
Yeah, look, I didn't do it alone. I had my mum and I had my sister, and we were a real team effort, but it was certainly something that I learnt a lot about myself, my character, and it built my resilience, and it's something that now in this new job I'm leaning on.
Fantastic.
Especially.
Sheena, thank you so much for coming on the program and sharing your incredible story and
thank you.
Talking us through the exciting things that are going on.
This is a great opportunity. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely awesome.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So earlier we spoke to Mr. Neil Angus, Shadow Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs Victoria. Here's what he had to share with us.
Hello, I'm Neil Angus, Shadow Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs here in Victoria. I'm pleased to send my best wishes to everyone attending this year's Vicforum 2021, organised by Polaran Language Services. The theme for this year's Vicforum 2021 is Unmasking the Pandemic, called COVID and Communication. And those attending will have the opportunity to share their COVID experiences and thoughts on how best to engage with our multicultural communities post-pandemic. The Liberal Nationals recognise the needs and aspirations of all Victorians to participate fully in society, and by doing so, help each other deepen our understanding of Victoria's diversity. The Vicforum 2021 plays an important role in our commitment to support a diverse and harmonious multicultural Victoria. It is an opportunity to learn more about one another, who we are, where we have been, and to see where we as a community are going. I congratulate Polaran Language Services for organising this event, and I wish everyone attending a successful and insightful forum.
Thank you, Neil. We heard from Neil Angus, Shadow Minister for Multicultural Affairs Victoria there. And now we have Mark Painting, CEO of National Accreditation Authority for Translators and Interpreters. Let's hear from Nati, the generous key sponsors of the Vicforum 2021.
Today we are here to talk about NATI. Can you just briefly tell us what NATI does? I know that you've been the CEO for about 5 years now, maybe longer now?
That's right, 5.5 now.
Mm-hmm. What does that NATI do? What's your remit and what's your job at NATI? What have you achieved? What's there to do still?
Yeah, sure. Well, NATI's been around now for 44 years, established back in 1977. It was established to support a wave of post-war migrants that didn't speak English settling in Australia, and it was important to have standards in place that made sure and gave confidence to people who needed an interpreter in particular, that interpreter had met some sort of standard so that there was confidence in doing that. That is still very much part of our role, although the quality and standards have become more important in recent times. So NATI is the national professional standards body and the certifying authority for people to work as a translator interpreter in Australia. So we issue certification to people who meet our requirements, and that usually involves passing a NATI test in either translating or interpreting. NATI is very unique by international standards. There are a few other certifying accreditation type bodies around the world, but none that have anywhere near the breadth of languages that NATI covers. And of course, in Australia, the certification system also covers Australian Sign Language and a range of Australian Aboriginal languages, as well as all the migrant languages we have. So we are continuing on with that. There continues to be new migrants from different parts of the world and bringing with different languages coming to Australia. So that is an ongoing challenge for us to be able to develop and manage the testing and the certification system as those languages keep expanding, and we keep up to try to meet the needs of those people by maintaining a pool of certified people, certified interpreters and translators who can meet that demand.
Why does NATI, and I've noticed that you do support many industry events, why do you do that? What's in it for you?
Yeah, thanks, Ava. Well, we just think it's really important that we are seen in the sector, but also seen to be supporting the industry. So yeah, and congratulations on the forum. It's been 5 or 6 years now. Obviously, last year when it was a bit of a challenge, but we've been there since the start, and I really congratulate Polar and others for participating, because I think, like I said, it's a really good, exactly that, a forum to talk and discuss some of these issues. It doesn't mean we can fix them all quickly, but we have to be mature enough to put them there and discuss them and see what all the parties can do. And we're happy to continue to support that.
Thank you so much. And we will see, hopefully face to face at some point soon.
Yeah, thank you, Eva, and all the best.
Thank you.
Back again. Now, thank you for that Mark Painting there from NATI, joined by Eva Hussein. And now let us welcome Bui Thay, who is Deputy Chair of the Victorian Multicultural Commission. He is joined by Aaron Hubka, CEO of Polar Language Services. Welcome to you both.
Thank you for having us.
Bui, I want to start with you here. And now you're with the Victorian Multicultural Commission, and their role is to support and advocate for culturally and linguistically diverse Victorians. You've been at the job for some months now. What have been some of the biggest challenges in 2020, I should say, which was a challenging year across the board?
Thank you. Before I begin, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians upon the land which I'm joining this conversation from, and pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. I want to share my personal reflection, but also some points around what we've been doing at the Victorian Multicultural Commission. It was a challenging year for everyone, and also particularly for our multicultural communities. But despite that, it was amazing to see the community spirit that everybody is contributing so positively and working together. The care and generosity of our community, organizations and local businesses, and also the community is resilient in terms of bringing together and making sure that everyone was supported and no one was left behind. I also feel very privileged to be working alongside many of our community champions here in Victoria, and it has been an absolute pleasure. At the VMC, the biggest VMC, the Victorian Multicultural Commission, our biggest challenge was balancing the critical work that COVID-19 directed toward us, and also maintaining our normal work. Also, I want to acknowledge us having a small team. I want to acknowledge our commissioners and our teams for their dedication and commitment. Over the last few months, we were able to quickly redirect our work and our effort towards helping our grassroots communities, and particularly those who were impacted, the communities, those who were impacted by the pandemic. We were able to mobilize and make those phone calls, reach out to them, bring them to the table, making sure that the Department of Health and Human Service, now known as the Department of Health, was able to brief them, provide them information, but also give them access to the emergency relief. Through the advocacy work we undertook during the Wave 2, a total funding of 5.3 million was directed to our communities. Organizations such as the Wellspring for Women, Australian Women, Muslim Women for Human Rights, Sikh Care, the Jewish Care, Indian Care, and ICV were some of those organizations. And also we were able to advocate for many of the roles at the Working for Victoria scheme, which was dedicated to supporting our multicultural communities across 10 organizations. It was a mammoth year, and we provided both tactical and practical solutions to the department, and we were able to be part of the Coal Task Force and many other committees on across the government to ensure that the needs of our multicultural communities were addressed. In addition, we were also on the ground during the public housing lockdown, supporting our communities from day one. And took part in the daily incident management meeting, which took place every 2 hours.
Every 2 hours, you
yes,
were
indeed.
checking in. Fantastic.
And our chairperson, Vivian Nguyen, co-chaired the weekly meetings to ensure that our community's voice was heard, and also made sure that the government was able to respond in a promptly and timely manner.
Fantastic.
Some of the challenges that our communities were facing also highlighted the systematic issues such as racism and gaps in equity service delivery. We want our multicultural communities to be heard from the beginning, and we want to make sure that their needs are a major consideration in everything that we face as a state. Hopefully we have learned from it, and we can reflect as a society and work to make the change that are needed to support our multicultural communities.
You feel like the pandemic maybe brought some of these things to the surface a lot quicker, which you guys could then react to and help with. Yeah, fantastic. So how exactly, I suppose, in those senses, how has the VMC been supporting the multicultural community for the past 12 months or so? So even before the pandemic began.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, during and before, we were able to, apart from the practical support that we were providing to various agencies and governments and to our communities, we were also keeping informed and advising our government and agencies on issues that were impacting them, our communities, including family violence, mental health, youth justice, disability, LGBTIQ+, racism, international students, temporary visa, settlement.
Everyone.
The whole spectrum. And that's the beauty of working at the commission is we get to work with a range needs of our communities. And it is amazing to see that we were able to wave our flag so that our communities could have a seat on the table and be heard. We commissioned 2 reports on employment, so we could have a better understanding, and we're at the moment currently unpacking and seeing how it could contribute toward the recovery, especially for women and young people, which is, I think, very important. We have made submission to the Royal Commission in Mental Health report. We are currently unpacking that as well. We have contributed to other submissions, including the anti-vilification protection submission, the federal response to COVID-19, family violence reform, and improving response to the justice system. We have supported our communities through our grassroots small pool of grant, where our commissioners were able to, some of our commissioners were able to lead some of those projects. As business as usual, we also continue to work with our Regional Advisory Council, our Multi-Faith Advisory Council, and also our Multicultural Chamber of Commerce, who are our ears and eyes on the ground. And it's a team effort.
It's a very busy group, isn't it?
Yeah,
Lots of moving parts.
And we continue to kick off our events and celebration in a COVID-safe way, at the same time balancing everything, including the Victorian Multicultural Excellence Award, which took place at the end of last year.
Fantastic. Well, speaking of celebrations and whatnot, we've got the Cultural Diversity Week has been a part of the Victorian fabric for years and years now. And the theme this year's week looks to multicultural diversity in 2030. So they're looking ahead. How has the pandemic affected these celebrations this year?
Like many organizations, we could not host our event last year,
Yeah.
we took the opportunity to highlight some of the amazing work that our multicultural communities were doing,
Yeah.
And that was just amazing, because it was all the effort towards strengthening our communities. Much of our work was diverted in supporting our communities heavily impacted by COVID, and it was no time for celebration yet, And I want to thank and acknowledge all the community organization and individuals who participated in the food package and emergency relief, face mask and other essential deliveries and distributions, and also the welfare checks on some of the most vulnerable members of our communities. Through the VMC's effort, 25% of those who received the funding from the Coal Task Force were new to the government and have never received grants before, which is a great indicator that our communities who have been impacted by COVID are receiving the funds to support their communities. And I'm pleased to mention that this year we're holding the Cultural Diversity Week in a hybrid way.
Yep.
And I believe that it will give our communities more option to join in and participate. And it's not just going to be during the month of March, but throughout the year. And that way we can celebrate and remember, the importance of diversity and what it means to everyone. We are also at the moment just launched our Refugee Week Awards, and I want to encourage everyone who's watching this to nominate your local heroes.
Yeah, fantastic. Wait, you're a busy man. I can only imagine what it's like. And unfortunately, I think it's only going to get busier from here for you. So thank you again for coming in and taking the time to speak to us. Aaron, I'm going to move over to you now.
Sure.
So this is the 6th edition of Polaron's very successful Diversity Forum. It's a joint effort by people and organisations who care about the community with our multicultural audiences.
Mm-hmm.
How has this forum, I suppose, we've discussed a few ways, but how has it differed from previous episodes in the series, I suppose I'd say?
Mm-hmm. The forum has evolved over the last 6 years.
There's a good word. Evolved. I like that.
And this year, obviously with the pandemic, we've decided to go with a hybrid model. We had a completely online forum last year as a result of COVID. But this has given us an opportunity to have a bigger reach. We've got over 500 people registered for today's event.
Fantastic.
And obviously the topic is the pandemic and communication.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's poignant to have this event. And we're very proud to be hosting it again and partnering with the VMC and other multicultural organisations as well.
It's a great group. Everyone that's here and joining me today. It's very exciting.
Absolutely.
So I hear Polaron's expanded significantly during the pandemic to cater for the language needs of multicultural communities in Australia, which is fantastic to hear that even during a pandemic you can make some moves.
Correct.
What are the plans for the next 12 months? What does that look like, assuming that the pandemic sort of remains somewhat under control?
Yes, that's a good point. No, last year was challenging and very rewarding for us. We were fortunate enough to expand through the support programs that we had with state and federal government departments, being able to get those in-language translations out there for multicultural communities. But the credit really goes to all of the staff, the vendors at Polaron. They work extremely hard. They've done a fantastic job to help us get to this point, and next year's only looking bigger and brighter.
Bigger and brighter. Fantastic. Well, thank you, both of you. Wei, Aaron, thank you for joining me on the program as well. Easy done. Now to our next segment, and Professor Brett Sutton was appointed the Victorian Chief Health Officer 2 years to the day. Brett's portfolio includes a range of statutory functions. He also provides clinical and scientific advice and leadership on issues impacting public health. Brett is the spokesperson for the Victorian Government on matters related to health protection and engages with the community on public health matters. Brett was a regular at daily media conferences for most of 2020. You might remember that purple background, offering much needed reassurance in turbulent times. I caught up with both Brett and Polaron founder Eva Hussein earlier. Let's take a listen. Guys, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, I wanted to start off with your overseas exploits, Brett. So first up, given your work in Ethiopia and Afghanistan, I was wondering if you could share some insight on your ability to disseminate health information in those contexts.
Look, I think I learned so much working in those countries, but I've actually travelled to 80 plus countries, mostly in Asia, but really all around the world. And there are so many lessons out of it. I guess the key things for me is that everyone works differently, and language is really critical, and in ways that we don't always realise. There's a filter of experience we bring in the way that we talk to people, our cultural filter, our family filter, and the same with language. And I think it's really important to understand what it means to people. It'll have layers that are blind spots for me, that might relate to colonial history, that might relate to sense of identity, that has really powerful connections that I've learned over time that there are 4 languages, official languages in East Timor, English being one of them, Portuguese being another, Bahasa Indonesia, and Tetuan, and they all have different layers to them. Indonesian Bahasa is a language both of a occupying power, but is also daytime soap opera language. So things mean really different things to people based on language, and there's so much nuance and complexity to it.
Did you catch a lot of soap operas while you were overseas? Is that something that helped learn the languages?
In a way, I mean, I actually learned more French in Afghanistan working with my MSF France counterparts, but I learned Dari, I learned a bit of Pashto. I realised that just a few words and making an effort and trying to get pronunciation right, and taking the time and effort to learn some of those things just builds the bridges in ways that you wouldn't imagine. People really appreciate that you've looked enough into life and history and culture to make a difference.
And in relationship to those bridges, when it comes to health as well, and how do you communicate, when there's language barriers in regards to health?
Look, it is tricky. You have to understand, again, that there's a diversity of understanding, diversity of modes and methods that you should use. So don't come in with your English-centric, Western-centric ideas. Spend most of your time listening. People will tell you the channels that they get information from, the channels that they would normally listen to, some of the competing noise in terms of misinformation or disinformation, and you really need to go into that space and don't do it from a top-down approach. Really understand, spend all your time listening, understand how best to access those individuals and engage with them in a really meaningful way, and understand that it's not going to be one pathway, it's not going to be one mode, it's going to be 1,000.
And what's one of the greatest challenges you found while you were overseas in this sector, trying to help them learn?
Look, it's very challenging to be agile. Obviously, there are emergencies that arise. You need to get critical information out really quickly. So you have to be technically correct. You have to try and be consistent. There's always that tension between being fast and being right. You don't want people to misunderstand things. But if you can get those core messages and then rapidly go through that sense testing, so get your target audiences, not just one, but segmenting your audiences, really understanding how they understand what you're trying to say, and then see how you modify it, and then really try and devolve that information so that those individuals can then take the message in a way that's appropriate for their networks, for their communities.
Unreal, unreal. Let's bring it a bit closer to home. I was wondering if you could shed some light on what happens behind the scenes or behind that purple background that we saw all those years, or months, I should say, not years, fingers crossed.
It seems like years.
When we're going through a state of emergency in Victoria, can you tell us how many people are involved in those processes that affect the entire state? You know, what went on?
I mean, really, there are hundreds and hundreds of people who input in one way or another. I've got a policy team, there's a testing team, there's a community engagement team, the outbreak response team. They've all got something to contribute in that space. You know, amongst the 2,500 who've been stood up for COVID, everyone's contributing in one way or another. I guess in terms of my key role, which was framing the public health directions and getting them into a law, if you like, there's a policy team that are really working 24/7, and the comms team that are hand in glove with them, again trying to translate that rather tricky legal language into an accessible form that people can understand. But it is super challenging because those messages and that public health policy was changing on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis. We did have to be agile, but there were literally hundreds of people who input into that. Ultimately, I carry the can on the public health directions, but I'm not making it up on my own. There are you know, epidemiologists who are informing me through the evidence, and then lots of expert policy individuals who are trying to frame it in that, again, balance of proportionality, but also prevention, the primacy of prevention, one of the principles that I need to incorporate in my thinking.
Yeah. So what does it look like the night before a stage 4 lockdown is announced backstage there? I can only imagine what you guys are
super
going
busy.
through.
We're all juggling multiple balls. They've always been late nights. Luckily, we've changed the tempo a bit. So, you know, today I'll be signing off directions for the next easing. That'll all be done by 6 p.m. I'm very happy with that timeline because the midnights meant that I was still reading dozens of pages right up until the witching hour.
Unreal, unreal. So what do you think some of the most critical lessons we learnt during, you know, the lockdown and during those moments where we did feel, I want to use the word trapped. What are the critical lessons you think, from our perspective, we learnt as a society?
Look, I think we learnt that we can do it when we do it together, and we can do it when we're all understanding of what the journey is and why we're on that journey. That's not an easy message to get across. I think, you know, the Premier and I were really focused on that task, knowing how tricky it was for everyone. You know, at an individual level, it was supremely challenging to do what we were asking of people, but to ask a state of 6.7 million, that is super challenging. And so the clarity and consistency of messaging is one thing, but also providing the justification and saying, we're with you, we'll get there together, and here's the light at the end of the tunnel. I think if we'd said, as is sometimes the message now, I think in Europe, we're not really sure how this is going, you know, stay with us, we might change our minds. That's a really hard message. We did have some targets that we were aligned to, and you know, I was certainly focused on saying we are slowly but surely heading there, and we'll all get there together.
Do you think we succeeded in that?
Oh, no
overall?
question, we succeeded. Look, lots of hiccups on the way, lots of challenges, you know, lots of harms. Lockdown is not an easy thing, psychologically, economically. People suffered through it, but the success is being free of COVID in Victoria today. That is something to be profoundly proud of as the Victorian community.
What were some of the more worrying things you saw come out of the lockdown periods from a health perspective for Victorians?
Look, I know that people were calling Lifeline. People were psychologically traumatised and challenged by that. We're social human beings. We need the company of others. And so, you know, for those of us who had our family nearby at home, great. But others were isolated from loved ones and supports, and the things that lift us up in our hard times. And so to be individually challenged and then not to be able to reach out to those who would normally be our supports, I think that was really hard. I'm aware that calls to domestic violence hotlines were also increased. There are so many areas of our lives that were challenged in ways that needed the support of the whole community. Tried to facilitate that as much as possible, but there were always these constraints around what you can allow people to do while still controlling transmission of this deadly virus.
It's unreal. Eva, anything to add there?
I was going to say that being on the sidelines and being part of the multicultural community, I guess in Victoria, we really appreciated the leadership, and you could see that some of it was really gut-wrenching, really, and we were wanting to trust somebody, and I think you guys were there giving that message day after day after day. I mean, certainly I couldn't do that job, but the multicultural communities also rallied around, and I think there were issues with communication because there's no recipe for a crisis. Like, we can have all kinds of plans, but I think when it comes to actually doing it, people were tuning in day in, day out, listening to somebody they could trust. So I think on behalf of everyone, I don't know if you've got a lot of thank you words, but on behalf of the multicultural community, I think both you and the Premier's done an amazing job just communicating the complex in a simple way that people could trust and understand. Yeah.
Is there anything you guys might do differently in regards to the multicultural community during something like this if it were to happen again? Were there pieces missing, maybe?
There were definitely pieces missing from my point of view. We need to establish those relationships all of the time.
Yeah.
It's very hard to stand up, build trust and rapport over days. You need to have those links, those relationships, and those channels built over time. There have obviously been channels with government over many years, but we learned that we can always do more, and it's always great to have those embedded channels when you need to use them in a crisis. So, the local public health units is part of our medium-term strategy, if you like, to make sure that there are local solutions and channels for communication with all of the different communities across Victoria's diverse population.
I was going to say, you were talking about the countries you visited and the different languages that were in small spaces and things like that. Do you agree that maybe Melbourne or Victoria, has that as well? There is those...
No question.
Like, it's just unreal, the amount of different, ways to do things there are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very, very diverse, and I think one of the things we have learned is that whether you live in Changi or Toorak, you are connected because it's about health. And, some of these disparities or health differences, or how could I put it, systemic issues have shown through and some cracks. But I think we know that everybody tried their best. And I think, there's no question about that in Victoria, that, that's what it feels like to someone that's not part of the government. And I think in terms of what we could better is, and that's already been picked up, is to liaise with the communities and get them to tell us, as you said, what is it that they want? How do they want us to communicate with them rather than, tick boxes or...
And I was going to ask about perhaps the media that was done during those. I remember seeing the ads come up, dun, 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 COVID, Victoria, da, 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 da. Do you think they were effective ways of communicating with these people? Was it enough, I guess, for those ones? Or?
I think what Brad has said earlier, that you do have to craft your messages. Victorians aren't uniform. We're not, we're one, but we're many. And I think it's really important to understand what certain communities might need in terms of how the information is developed for them. But I think the most important thing is to engage them, because it is a sign of respect. If you know how to say, hello, how are you in Darri, that's a sign of respect. And it's kind of like a way to reach into the communities when they know you, and they know that you have their best interests at heart. So I think we've shown in Victoria that we can do it. Can we do it better? Sure. And we're working on it, I think, yeah.
No, it's great to just walk through the city and see the results that we've actually gotten. It's very exciting.
Absolutely.
Compared to certain parts of the world which are unfortunately going through it. Was there something about the pandemic, apart from the pandemic itself, that took you by surprise? Things that, came out of nowhere that you might not have seen coming, obviously apart from the pandemic itself?
Well, but that is a point to make. We, as a public health community and as a country, had kind of prepared for influenza pandemics. They have a peak, it goes for about 6 weeks. Yes, there are other waves, but to have to stand up for a year and for it not to be over is something else. And so, you know, a real lesson for us all is that we need to understand that flu viruses are not the only pandemics that we're going to face. Coronavirus pandemics could have challenges like this one that will completely surprise us in terms of the kind of response that's required. So not only was it a more severe illness than flu, it was, you know, it's had this time scale and it's changed the world in ways that none of us could have imagined. So that was absolutely from left field. I guess in the back of our minds, we knew from SARS and MERS coronaviruses that there was this potential, but we hadn't gone through a pandemic before. And so I think we just need to be really imaginative about what future challenges might present as.
What do some of those imaginations look like moving forward? Just to catch you off there.
Look, the key thing for us all in all times is that preparedness, the resourcing that goes into it, the planning that goes into it, always has you in better stead than trying to respond after the fact. So the extent to which you can embed systems, including the local public health units, the way that you establish those communication channels will always be better than trying to stand them up rapidly after the fact. So I think that's something that, you know, we're all working on, we're all considering, but that's going to work for a coronavirus pandemic, any other pandemic, any other health emergency, whether it's flood, fire, or you know, some of the other effects of climate change that we're going to see more and more often.
Yeah, you spoke about the you know, late nights and the worrisome meetings and all of that sort of thing. I was wondering about how this whole experience from last year has affected you both professionally and personally as well, if I can delve into that a little bit.
Yeah, look, there's not a Victorian who wasn't affected personally, so I'm not special in that regard. I had the challenge of juggling work and home life and kids home from school and whatever else. We, you know, at my home, we're very lucky. I had a job. I could leave the house to go to those press conferences. Many other people had it much, much harder than me. I guess I carried the weight of decision making. That was the main burden for me. And it's, you know, that's not a story of woe is me. That's just to say that anyone who cares about other people, who cares about the community, carries that burden of seeing people who are suffering. And there were 820 people who died in Victoria. And so for those individuals, their families, that was in my mind all the time. That was a really heavy burden to carry. But, you know, I understood that that was my job, and that some of that was unavoidable because whatever decision you make, there were harms associated with it. I was trying to find the least harmful path, as was every chief health officer, but that's not easy to carry. And you know, I needed my friends and colleagues and family to lift me up in those times, because that was tough. But as I say, so many Victorians went through tough times, and I think we all discovered the friends and loved ones and support mechanisms that we really value, because we did reach out to each other in ways that was wonderful to witness.
And the rise of Zoom.
And the rise of
Zoom. The glorious rise of Zoom.
Not in a good way.
Well, I got over it quite quickly. I don't know about you two, but Eva, was there any challenges for you during the lockdown period that you'd like to sort of recover and just go over it? I just find it fascinating to find how people went through it.
Well, certainly for our interpreters, that was tough, because all of a sudden we weren't able to go face to face with you know, clients, people that needed us. So hospitals, courts, any other context, we went on Zoom. Like 95% of everything went on Zoom. And that's tough because it's not a method that works best, you know, for vulnerable people that may not speak the language. And the other challenge was terminology, because as Brett was saying, everything was developing before our very own eyes. So something as simple as COVID or coronavirus in some languages didn't exist, so we had to make it up as we went along. Or explain it to the community what it meant. The other issue was misinformation. So people that aren't given information from a trusted source will reach out to others. So, you know, whether it's social media or, you know, back home, if you like, if somebody was born outside of Australia, could rely on information that isn't in line with the health messages we're promoting here. So that was a bit of a challenge. And I think, you know, making sure that the information that we are translating is succinct and fit for purpose. So yes, we can translate 20,000 words, but is anybody going to read it? Yes, we can put it on a website. Does anybody know of that website? So there are methods, and we do process information differently. Everybody does. We don't read books as much anymore. So we want immediate, but we want accurate, and we want reliable and trustworthy. So I think for a language services company, that's a challenge always, especially when there are 63 or 120 languages you have to deliver the same messaging to. So we're learning. That's been a steep learning curve for us as well.
Is social media a large part of the multicultural community in your experience? And was the misinformation we saw going out and around, I saw all sorts of things. Was that impactful as well on the community?
It can be, because I think that misinformation is another layer of isolation for people. So yes, we have to stay at home, but if you do not speak English well and you don't understand what the Premier and the Chief Health Officer are telling you, then you're further isolated. So I think that immediacy of information was a little bit missing, and that's something that we could have improved. And technology is there to tap into. And maybe that's another area that we could look at improving, and how messages are delivered to people in a more targeted way. Because people use, Snapchat and WeChat and Weibo and goodness, there's hundreds of those things.
Yes.
So how do you know which one to use? How do you know how to reach into that community, but in a, firstly, respectful way, but I think also in a way that actually does the job. So it's not about translating everything for everybody. It's about really working out, what does the community need? How do they need it? What are we telling them? Yeah.
Brett, back to you. I just wanted to ask about the other chief health officers that you worked with and the other states. Was that a good relationship going on between you? Because there was a lot of, look at Sydney, you're in lockdown, do you know what I mean? There was, and that was a social media thing.
Sure.
But just from a professional sense, the chief health officers working together and having, not a good time, but working together.
We worked very, very closely together. We were on calls every day.
Yeah.
I've just been off a call now again with my counterparts. So that was a fantastic network. We should challenge each other. We did.
Yeah.
But we also asked questions. We offered our own lessons and advice. That's a critical part. They helped me so much in Victoria's response. I hoped I contributed to their considerations about local responses. That rivalry that happened between jurisdictions, I think that was mostly at a community level. For us as public health people, we know that any jurisdiction failing, if you like, or being challenged is everyone's issue. So we all wanted everyone to win.
Yeah, right.
We were just trying to work out ways to back each other in the most useful way possible. But it was a really supportive and really useful network.
That is reassuring to hear. Now, the vaccine's rolling out. I don't know if you guys just want to have a quick rundown of how that's going at this point. Nurses have begun to be vaccinated. I've seen people doing it. Is it going well from your standpoint?
Yeah, I think it's going well.
Yep.
Clearly, it's been a slow and steady build, but it's building week on week in Victoria, and we will have more clinics, more sites, more of those large vaccination centres standing up, and the GPs are coming online now with direct supply from the Commonwealth for all of those practices that are about to give vaccine to the 1B priority population. So we'll get there. I do reflect on the fact that having no coronavirus transmission in Victoria is the very best starting place to get the vaccine out, because it means that people are not in danger as they're going to their GPs, and we could get the whole population covered with the vaccine before we have to worry about dealing with outbreaks at the same time. But those challenges will be there, but I think it's going all right.
Yeah, and I mean, I hate to mention the anti-vax sort of crowd and the not riots, but the protests, the small protests we've seen. How do you respond to that sort of thought pattern within the community?
Yeah, the true anti-vaxxers, the fervent, loud voices, they're a tiny minority, maybe 1.5%, 2% of people. I set that aside. The people I want to engage with are those who are open to hearing. There's probably 20, 25% of the population who have some legitimate concerns. They're asking questions like, this was a vaccine developed in 12 months, are you sure it's safe? What's the difference between AstraZeneca and Pfizer vaccine? What are the side effects? How long will this protection last? Will I need a booster? They're all things that I would love to engage with individuals about. But the really, the core protesting group, I don't think I'll ever reach them. I don't think they want to hear from me, and I don't think they'll trust me. So I'm going to direct my efforts to people who are open to hearing, the good and the bad with everything about this response, vaccines included.
And moving back to the multicultural sort of section, with vaccines as well for them, has there been a good response in your eyes?
So the federal government has produced lots of information and good information actually to I think 63 different language communities.
Wow.
And I think there's more work to be done, but certainly, for example, SBS has recorded messages rather than written ones. There were video messages from sort of trusted community leaders. The communities are rallying together, and they know that they also have a responsibility, I guess, being community leaders, and sometimes you are put up on that pedestal because you're there, in making sure that we do our best in sending those messages out. And at the end of the day, it is a person's choice whether they go for it or not, but I think giving them the right information is what we want them to have. And if that's in language information, that's so be it. But I think that there is a bit of work to be done in that regard.
Now, just on that topic, in your opinion, what are some actions we're taking right now to improve communication with people from a multicultural background? We've discussed some of the things maybe we missed or could be improved. Have we got anything we can sort of go over just to wrap it all up?
Yeah, look, from that local engagement perspective, I think we're working and building on that more and more. So we're taking advantage of more of those. And again, they're Zoom, but sometimes they're face-to-face forums where we talk to those trusted community leaders. They're not always the formal representative, linked to government. They're just individuals who are persuasive, trusted, and networked. And I think that's lessons that we're learning around how to reach people appropriately.
And I think they also care, like most people really care about what happens in the community, what happens in Victoria. And I think, if we're starting from a position of proactive rather than reactive, that's already a good place to be.
Well, I'd like to thank you so much for, Brett, thank you for coming in and giving us your insight.
Pleasure.
Eva, for having us here. Thank you. And now for something completely different. Let's face it, translation can be a bit of a dry topic for some. However, culture and language are great. So, trust the team at Polaron to come up with a fun way to explain how translation works. Take a look at this.
Today we're going to explain how to get translations right. But first, let us show you where things can go wrong and what to do about it. This is Sam. He lives alone. Since COVID, he's been worried about his future. He needs help, but he doesn't know where to get it. This is Peter, Stephen and Grace. They work at Mental Equity Support Service, known as MES. They are communication experts. They have just received some bad publicity for not connecting with diverse communities and are having a meeting about it. Peter is the kind of guy who's keen to get it right.
We need to do something about it, and we need to get it right.
Stephen is a busy man and can't see the value of translating anything.
Why do we even need to do this? It's going to be expensive. We don't have time for this.
Grace is full of good intentions and energy. But is that enough?
I have an idea. We've got this great document that explains everything about mental health.
But this is in English. How are diverse communities going to understand it?
I know what to do. Let's use an online translation tool to translate it. It's free and instant.
Did you know that by using Google Translate, you're breaching people's privacy?
Online translation tools are just not going to work.
Okay then, I have another idea. Why don't we get Mary from Finance to translate it? She speaks 4 languages.
Did you know speaking another language doesn't make you a professional translator?
This is a waste of time. I know a translation agency. Translation Factory are fast, cheap, and I'm sure their translations are good enough.
Okay, I'm on it. I'll call this agency right now.
Hello, this is Liz from Translation Factory. How can I help? Yeah, we can do your translations, yeah. 20,000 words by tomorrow, yeah, sure, we can do it. Just email me your document, yeah. Goodbye. Hey, we have 20,000 words translation. We need it by tomorrow morning. Can you do it?
I haven't had much work recently. I will better do it. Hi Liz, here is the translation. And here you have it, translation done in record time. But will it save the day?
I got it done. The translation is ready.
Everyone's looking satisfied as the translation is being uploaded to the website. Meanwhile, Sam, home alone, has no idea that this resource is even available. Now let's look at a better way of doing translations. Let's go back to where we started. This is Peter, Stephen and Grace. They work at Mental Equity Support Service, known as MES. They are communication experts. They have just received some bad publicity for not connecting with diverse communities and are having a meeting about it.
Peter, Stephen and Grace need to get their message across to people with mental health issues who do not speak English very well. They've identified translation as the best way to connect with multicultural audiences, but don't know the best way to go about it. I'm about to tell you why you should partner up with Polaron for your translations. At Polaron, before we even start, we make sure we understand what you're trying to communicate, why and to whom. We look at your English content and work with you to make sure it's clear, meaningful and fit for purpose. We help you select the most efficient dissemination channels. Then run it past the target community and get their feedback so we know how best to communicate the information to them. Once the content is finalised, we allocate it to one of our trusted translators. We always work with NAIDI certified translators because they're local to Australia and understand the target audience best. When a translation is done, it's checked by a second trusted NAIDI certified linguist. Their job is to ensure that it's accurate and meets the highest standards possible. Our internal QA system kicks in at this point to check that the formatting and presentation reflects the project specifications. After that, we ask the community to approve the translation, confirming it's appropriate for the audience and ticks all the boxes. We put together a glossary of terms, traceability certificates and feedback reports. Finally, we work with you and our community partners to disseminate the translated content to the people who most need it. Can you see how we've already had the community buy-in? They've been involved in the project all along. But what does this have to do with Sam?
The message finally gets to Sam. The content is accessible, accurate, as well as culturally appropriate.
Good stuff there. Now, if you have any questions about how to reach your multicultural audiences, get in touch with the team at Polaron, of course. Now, next in our program is a message from our partner organisations. This forum would not have been possible without them, so a big thank you should go their way. Check out what's next.
Hi, I'm Mark Painting from NAATI. Welcome to the Vicforum 2021. NAATI is responsible for setting, maintaining and promoting high standards within the translating and interpreting profession in Australia. So remember, if you need the services of a translator or interpreter, make sure they are certified by NAATI.
Hi everyone, I'm Tula Alexiniotis from the Centre for Culture, Ethnicity and Health. So at CEH, we provide professional development and resources to agencies to help improve their response to people from refugee and migrant backgrounds. Two examples of how we do this through our Speaking COVID-19 workshops. We support language professionals and bicultural workers to understand all things COVID. We do this so that we can help them communicate this to their communities in simple ways and in their language. Another thing we do is we manage health translations on behalf of the Victorian Department of Health. This is where people can access over 23,000 health and wellbeing resources in over 100 languages. I encourage you all to have a look at it. It's a great platform, www.healthtranslations.vic.gov.au. And finally, as a North Richmond Community Health staff member, I got vaccinated today, so I'm very pleased about that. Thank you, Polaron. We're a very proud Vicforum partner this year again. Enjoy the day. Bye for now.
Hi, my name's Lisa Trebuzio and I'm the manager of the Centre for Cultural Diversity and Ageing. We have recently received funding from the Department of Health to lead the multilingual older persons COVID-19 support line. The support line gives callers information about COVID-19, dementia supports, and access to aged care services including home care and residential services. It is available in 6 languages: Arabic, Cantonese, Mandarin, Greek, Italian, and Vietnamese.
Hello, this is Viv Nguyen from the Victorian Multicultural Commission. We are an independent body that connects and advocates for culturally and linguistically diverse Victorians to be able to contribute and participate in all aspects of our society. A particular initiative that we are working on is to understand what Victorians would like to see Victoria looks like in 2030. And I really encourage you to join us online, in person, give us a call, send us an email in whichever way, shape or form that suits you to tell us what you think Victoria should look like in 2030. Thank you.
Hello, Victor Purton here from the Centre for Optimism. And what we'd like to share with you is our new animated micro-credential called The Habits of an Optimist. We have some of the greatest talent of multicultural Australia and the world recording their voices on what makes you more optimistic and turning it into an entertaining, educational product that one British government official said was the best hour he spent in the whole of lockdown. We'd invite you to try it and share it with your friends.
Hi, my name is Sheena White and I'm a member of the Northern Metropolitan Region. 2020 was a challenging year and it taught us so much about the importance of communicating in different ways to talk to different communities across our state. Throughout the pandemic last year, we worked to provide government health advice in over 56 languages in audio and visual formats. It's great to see this forum going ahead so that we can share what worked well, so that we can continue on a path forward and recover as a stronger Victoria.
Welcome back, everyone. Now, Aristotle once said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." Debating offers this very opportunity to challenge your thinking and question your views. We have assembled a distinguished panel of experts to help us answer a pretty controversial question. Are pandemics good for us? Let us welcome Maria Demopoulos, Special Advisor for the Victorian Department of Justice and Community Safety. Welcome to you. And of course, Eva as well. Maria is joining us to moderate the debate. And now, Maria, are pandemics good for us, do you think?
Michael, thank you. That's clearly going to be a debate amongst this fine group of people, but I do take my moderating very seriously. So can I say that moderating a debate is not so much about debating a question, but a statement. So let me slightly amend that.
Okay.
The topic of the debate will be the statement, pandemics are good for us. Now, just for the audience back home, a couple of rules around how a good debate should function. So we've obviously got 2 teams of incredibly talented and esteemed speakers, hopefully interspersed with some great entertainment along the way. We have our affirmative team, and of course the leader for that team will be Victor. He's going to introduce himself, then the team and what they'll be talking about. We've then got, of course, the negative team, and the team leader is Alison Coelho, her dear friend, so I'm looking forward to what she might say. Again, she will be introducing herself and the rest of the team and a bit of a breakdown about what they will say. Now, importantly, despite me wanting to be the absolute judge of the outcome of this, we do have a wonderful judging panel, and I am going to list them because I think it's important. We've got Francesca Cimarelli from NATI. We've got Selen Akinisi, from MCCI. We've got Rana Ibrahimi from the Cancer Council Victoria, Aaron Hubka from Polaron, and Dominic Carter Polaron. Now, I did ask if there was a tie, whether I would have the final casting vote. So if there's a rush to provide me with chocolate, feel free to do that. Look, I'm going to hand it over now, because there's no doubt the pandemic has tested all of us. It's amplified inequities, but it's also brought with it a host of important ethical, social, political questions. So over to Victor to take us away with the first of the arguments for the affirmative team. Victor.
Thank you, Maria, and it's wonderful to join you and to see the negative team there as well, and they are a negative-looking group of people. We're optimists. We believe that pandemics bring grief, they bring pain, they bring death, but like all disasters, whether it's earthquakes, volcanoes, whatever, it brings out the best in mankind and womankind. So we open up with a wonderful book, the oldest book written in English by a woman, by Mother Julian of Norwich. And it's called The Revelations of Divine Love. And the line that still resonates 700 years later from the middle of the Black Plague is, all shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well. And that translates to what Harvard uses now, Stanford, the definition of optimism. It's a belief that good things will happen and that things will work out in the end. And if things haven't worked out, it's not the end. So our team is going to focus on the good things that have come out of the pandemic. And I'll be addressing medicine and new ways of working. We have Erica, who is here with me. We're the blue team, as you can see. I can see Mohammed is in blue as well. And Erica is going to talk about how it has strengthened community, both in Australia and globally. And then Mohammed is going to talk about the incredible ways in which it has connected community and government. Now, Brett Sutton had 20 minutes to put our case. He put it brilliantly. If we have a look at the progress of medicine through this pandemic, it's been astonishing. That in 1 year, we could produce almost 100 vaccines, at least 10 being rolled out in the world in mass numbers of hundreds of thousands and millions. It's astonishing. But it goes beyond that, because Brett put all of the good stuff around that. We go beyond that because now the technology used by Pfizer and Moderna is going to be applied to malaria, a disease that kills millions of people every year. And the same technology has the prospects of being used for HIV and Ebola and other diseases. So we may have in the next 3 or 4 years the cure to a number of diseases that kill millions of people a year. And then on the more mundane side, have a think about whether you had a flu or a cold this year. In Melbourne, there was 1 flu death last year. Just reinforcing hygiene, washing our hands, being a little bit more careful in shaking hands after doing other things like going to the toilet has meant that the community is astonishingly healthier than it would be. Then the second thing, we've done a survey, 4,000 people around the world at the Centre for Optimism, and asked them, is there a better self? Is there a better normal? Well, for 70% of the people we asked, there is a better normal. And one answer just reflected it. It was a woman who works in a call centre and has been working from home. And she said, nothing better than getting morning tea from the kitchen, lunch from the fridge, having husband and kids in other parts of the house, going out into the garden for morning tea. And then as a woman who has to wear a suit, she said, I regulate my own temperature of the office. I mean, what office can replicate the temperature that suits the person?
So Victor, you've got 30 seconds left.
The hybrid way of working. There's going to be astonishing advances on that side. So look, as we look at it, it's terrible. There are millions of people who have died. There are millions of people who are sick. But is it something that has benefited society? Then there's little doubt. Now, I have one more point, Maria, that's just escaped my attention. And the last one is this. A pandemic creates stories of hope and optimism. So have a think about you in 20 years' time or 30 years' time, mother or grandmother, father or grandfather or great-grandfather. These are the stories that make families, how we survived the pandemic, how a kid studied from school for 6 months, how our son decided to become a research scientist in health to help save the world. So, yes.
Thanks,
in
Victor.
summary,
Thank
our
you.
position is
Thank you. I am taking the timing very seriously. It's important that we stick to the rules, Victor. I can see why, indeed, your title of Chief Optimism Officer at the Centre for Optimism, very apt. You've given some great examples there. I'm now going to introduce you to the opening of the negative team. So, Alison Coelho, over to you to lead us through the structure of your team's arguments.
Thank you, Maria, and also thank you, Victor. Before I start, though, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which the three of us are here today, both elders, past, present, and in particular those emerging right now. And as a migrant woman myself, it's really important to acknowledge that I work, I live, and I have grown a family here. We'll be talking about a range of things. So my esteemed colleagues, both Diana and Jess, will be talking about a range of things, including issues around racism and the impact that the pandemic has had on many elements of both sort of broadly societal as well as individual across the community. We cannot really see the positives with the pandemic. Before we go on, I'd like to talk about things like that the pandemic has highlighted and exacerbated health inequalities, the inequity experienced by particular communities has been quite dramatic. It's the same for whether it's a pandemic or not. It's the same people who experience chronic diseases, mental health issues. We are currently in a crisis. We're saying that we want people to go and access mental health services, but people can't because they're all full. There's waiting lists. And are they culturally competent? Are they culturally proficient? Are they trauma-informed? And are they perceived to be safe by the communities that we all work? So another pandemic example, I guess, which shows great disparities is the HIV pandemic, which is very much mirrored with this pandemic in the US, for instance. If we look at the map of where HIV exists in the US, it's mostly down south in those states where there's lower socioeconomic and huge populations of Hispanic and Black populations. So very much, we can look at what happened in Melbourne, where the greatest burden of disease happened, whereas Melbourne's west and southeast were former refugee and migrant communities live, and in the northern region of Melbourne. Another really important thing I think that we saw during the pandemic is the lack of appropriate communication with communities, and also lack of understanding that and whose obligation is it to provide information that people can actually understand. And I'm not purely talking about translated information, so we all know that there's not enough translated information at the start of the pandemic. But we are expecting communities to follow health directions without any appropriate information. But beyond just language.
So 30 seconds, Ali.
Okay, beyond language, there is a whole range of things to think about people's health literacy levels, tailoring information. We are not a homogenous community, and people need that information to help them. The last point I wanted to make was about racism and poverty. We see, again, communities being targeted. Look, Black Lives Matter that is happening across the globe. And we do note that in Australia, more people have died in custody, Aboriginal communities, First Nations communities.
Thanks, Sally. Thank you. There's no doubt, Erica, that Alison has raised some very important issues. That point about the amplification of inequities, an important one. How are you going to counter that one? Erica, over to you.
Thanks, Maria, and thanks, Alison. It was lovely to hear Team Negative also putting their arguments forward. And indeed, this pandemic allows us to identify weaknesses and sustainable systems and social structures that were inefficient, and our other team mentioned. The good thing to me is that inequities and gross inequities were exposed. And we are humanity, the society is a bit like a child. You can tell them, you're doing this wrong, but until you face it, you experience the pain, you are able to open the eyes and actually identify what's going wrong, not to repeat the same mistakes. And it was painful, and to be in the positive team, defending something so controversial like a pandemic, it's difficult. But to me, as an individual, as a member of the society, I realized that this actually made us reflect, reset, rethink, and redesign how we're doing things in the society. As I said, to me, the most positive thing is that we were able to identify all these inequities, and now it's the moment to address them and to actually redesign the manner in which we are doing things to actually respond to our communities. As a translator, an interpreter, and an academic, I've been saying forever that our translation system, our interpreting system still needs to address many gaps, like that of quality. And the pandemic allows us to see actually that we need to do something about it. It's the first time that government bodies have listened to us and actually are trying to work together in a cooperative manner with us to address what's happening. And hopefully we won't have instant responses, but at least it's put it in a journey that we can work together to improve things. Also, the pandemic has abolished borders, reduced costs, and eliminated physical barriers, making participation for many people who before couldn't participate in international events, cultural events, accessible, because it made us think outside the box. And as I think that humankind also thrives in adverse conditions. It's like the phoenix that rose out of the ashes, being brought up by a grandma who went through war and who was very hungry. And I just witnessed as a child, because she brought me up, how resilient she was and the impact she had in me in the future generations, because I'm still able to pass that on to my own children. And I'm hoping that with this pandemic, the same will happen. So as I said, the pandemic has abolished borders because we were able to develop technologies to enable this, for example. And it also made governments think outside the box and think about those who were in also more disadvantaged positions. JobKeeper is a good example of that. In Australia, we're very lucky, obviously, compared to other nations and continents, but people still could keep getting an income while they were suffering the adverse effects of this pandemic. And as I said, to me, equity and participation is a massive thing. For example, in our courts, up until now, there wasn't any system that would allow interpreters
30 seconds, Erica.
The speaker's presence, so we were able to introduce remote simultaneous interpreting and hearing loops that are allowing people who are not proficient in English to get the proceedings in their language. And that's just a tiny example. So yes, I have to say pandemics are bad, but they are making us reset, rethink, and redesign things to grow better and stronger as members of our society, and to be kinder to those who suffer.
Thanks, Erica.
In a more adverse situation. Thank you.
Well, that's going to be a challenge.
Before we go to team two, can we just make sure you guys are leaning forward a little bit closer to that microphone, just for our audience at home? That webcam audio sometimes gives us a bit of grief. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. So, Jessica, you're going to have a hard one here. What a clever attempt by the affirmative team to turn the inequities argument into something that's good. It's amplified it. It's highlighted it. We're having to do something about it. Jessica, over to you to try and rethink how the negative team might work here.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, Erica, for highlighting those arguments. I do think that the pandemic has highlighted inequalities. But what I'm going to argue is that increasing the disease burden across the globe as caused by this pandemic is clearly a bad thing. Our opponents are wrong because modern pandemics aren't good for us because they don't cause lasting system change for better. The Black Death, which hit Europe in the 1300s, killed 25 million people. That was 1/3 of the globe's population. With impacts that severe, social transformation was unavoidable. Those who survived benefited from an extreme labour shortage, and that meant workers could now choose who they worked for, and those in power had to provide better conditions, and that led to wage increases across the board. Now, in this modern pandemic, inequality on a global scale has become worse, not better. The rich became $3.9 trillion richer in the last 12 months, and workers globally lost $3.7 trillion in earnings, with the majority of those being women and young people. The vaccine rollout and the benefits of immunity that our opponents claim are good are just as unequally spread across the globe. Scott Morrison has had his 2 Pfizer vaccines, while nurses working on the front line have still not been vaccinated. And dangerous variants are appearing in Brazil, where vaccination programs aren't even happening. Scientifically, we still haven't seen the long-term impacts of COVID. Symptoms linger, and despite the pandemic petering out, we have millions of people who will suffer into the future due to COVID-related comorbidities that could otherwise have been avoided. So, due to humanity's advancements in technology and our scientific understanding of viruses and vaccines, we've managed to actually overcome the pandemic more quickly than humanity ever has before. Some might say that this disruption created the opportunity for change and for innovation, but efficiency isn't always a good thing. The true opportunity we had to change the world was never really harnessed. Modern pandemics don't encourage systems change. They force rapid, do whatever works approaches whereby authorities, whose responsibility it is to keep citizens safe, are led into controlling citizens' actions through law rather than taking the time to educate in order to prevent out-of-control transmission. Leaders, decision makers, and those with power have not been truly forced to reconsider common practices. Maybe we work from home now, but we still have a 5-day, 9-to-5 work week in the Western world. Maybe we wear masks on public transport, but public transport is still overcrowded and underfunded. Maybe scientific research has proven how invaluable it can be, but overall funding for scientific research is stagnant or falling, and researchers are being forced to choose other careers. Rather than the pandemic leading to solutions to poverty, inequality, discrimination, and power imbalances, things have only gotten worse. Millions have lost their lives, many millions surviving are worse off, and the status quo has not changed. Thank you.
Jessica, thank you. And Mohammed, the opposing team has posed some very interesting arguments that are going to be hard to disrupt here. The rich getting richer, an opportunity here for change that really hasn't been harnessed. Mohammed, you have the unenviable task of your concluding remarks for your team. Over to you.
All right, thank you very much. I've got 3 minutes, so I better get into it. Look, it's exhausting being negative. I have not heard any solutions here, and I think we need to take this opportunity to actually put solutions forward, and this is what we've been doing. I think we need to, people have said that there is inequality. Of course there is inequality. There's been inequality before the pandemic. But let's look at the opportunities that the pandemic has presented. We've been able to have a voice at the table for the first time ever. We've set up the Cold Health Advisory Group at a national level, and every advice that we've been putting forward health has been adopted. That's never happened before. That's a unique partnership between government and community. And I would love to see that continue beyond the pandemic. These are some of the rarest opportunities we have to ensure that we put these systems in place beyond the pandemic. We have taken control of the messaging. I know that hasn't translated into the community yet, but it will, because Becca has been pushing hard to make sure that resources are given to the communities. The task of communicating those critical messages even to the community so they can. So FECA will be managing a small grants program on behalf of the Department of Health. We are taking control of giving it to the community is getting into action, and that's the best way to. And we're trying to, I guess, realize the power of the community and the partnerships that we can build, and the sense of community is really important. Of course, I mean, the Democrats are there sitting there, and it's a box ticking exercise usually. And if you can't see it, you can't fix it. Until we have had a pandemic and they've seen the devastating effect of the pandemic euphoria, then all of a sudden they realize that the advice that we think actually starting to make sense. Without them seeing what the problems are, they won't be able. We've heard the opposing team talk about racism. The Race Discrimination Commissioner has recently outlined a roadmap for developing a national anti-racism framework. Pandemic that things practice. We have built our power. The community has built its power, and I think that is really powerful. And I think governments have started to realize it. What else is there to say? I mean, I can go on and go on, but we're here to focus on solutions, and some of the unique opportunities that the pandemic has shown us has been amazing. And I think I'm looking forward to ensure and structure remain in place beyond the pandemic. Thank you.
Mohammed, thank you. And again, some very convincing positions that you've shared with us. I really like that line about it's exhausting being negative. Diana, this is going to be a hard one. Now, certainly I can imagine that the judges are influenced on both sides, a bit of a balance going on here. Diana, what can you tell us in your concluding remarks that will perhaps put the opposing team in the clear winning frame? Over to you.
Thanks, Maria, and thank you to my esteemed colleagues and those who have come before. Thank you, Victor, and I agree the power of stories is definitely important, but how about the stories of all those who were denied the time with their mothers, daughters, sons, and grandfathers, and those who died from the pandemic? Erica, I definitely agree we need to reset and rethink, but are we reimagining a better world, or are we just perpetuating the status quo with those inequalities still in place because we haven't seen mass disruption to those systems that are much needed? And Mohammed, absolutely, being negative is not where we want to be, but what are the solutions to the longer term systems change? We're here to propose them, but are you listening? Where our communities need to be centred, First Nations communities need to be centred, and community-led solutions is where it's always been at. And we need to see longer-term sustainable change with our communities meaningfully engaged, rather than all of these short-term committees, task forces, and so-called collaboration, which is just a box-ticking exercise, as we mentioned. Further to summarise our points, as Ali mentioned, access to health and long-term implications. We saw a mass disparity in access, communications, all of that globally, but also in Australia, where we saw pockets of lower socioeconomic and race-related communities were disenfranchised, further marginalised and scapegoated by communities, and that also applies to Muslim and First Nations communities. Health literacy. It's great to see that we're finally across the line with that, but where was it at the peak of the pandemic over a year ago, with translations to our communities, meaningfully engaging community leaders and allowing them to self-organise? We didn't see that, and it came way too late in the game for it to be effective. Systemic racism is still pervasive, and as my esteemed colleague Ali mentioned, with more Aboriginal deaths in custody than those who died from the pandemic in Australia. Where's the outrage for that? We're coming up to the 30-year anniversary of the Royal Commission inquiry into Aboriginal deaths in custody in 2021. We're not seeing the outrage for that. People have been organising Black Lives Matter protests. We didn't see one transmission at those protests, nor in community-led mobs out in regional Australia. Jess, my other esteemed colleague, talks about the worsening inequalities in the health profession, creating a billionaire class in terms of wages and workers' rights. The vaccine rollout and the benefits of immunity have exacerbated inequality, and then we need to encourage a systems change. What I need to talk about as well is that we have seen this be a gendered crisis, as more women have lost their jobs and had to carry the immense mental load of working from home, homeschooling and carers duties. The pandemic has only brought to light all of the systemic and structural failures of our thinly veiled egalitarian and democratic state. We saw family and domestic violence cases spike, increase the number of people seeking out specialist family violence services, and the issues of power and control over restrictions in movement, isolation tactics, and keeping victim survivors away from traditional supports was made easier, coupled with increased surveillance over digital technologies and children at home. We saw racism-related hate crimes spike with anti-Asian vilification, both online and in person, reaching new record highs. The Black Lives Matter protests in June last year, the heavy carceral and policing approach only worked to re-traumatise our already vulnerable and marginalised communities,
10
which became the issue with the hard lockdowns of the housing estate. So this once again confirmed that the state is disproportionately scapegoating and targeting First Nations, Black and Brown communities and Muslim communities during lockdown.
Thanks, Diana. A very powerful way to conclude. My goodness, irrespective of what our judges might determine, I'm sure you will all agree that was an incredibly dynamic, very articulate, very persuasive arguments on both sides. As I say, I'm always open to being manipulated through the use of chocolate, but certainly I would have to agree it's going to be a tough call for the judges. Now, I understand, Eva, that our judges are furiously having a debate themselves about who was the more powerful and persuasive. Do we have an outcome yet?
No, we're working on it, but we do have a couple of comments, and that might give you an idea of where we're heading with the verdict, but you never know. So one of the comments is, yes, there are negative aspects, but without negativity, we couldn't address them and try to find positive solution. My vote, 100% for team affirmative.
Right. Okay.
There we go.
Here we go.
Easy done.
Okay, so a couple more minutes, I think, for the judges to try and resolve their own dilemmas here about who was the most persuasive.
We are. So I'm just going to show it to you.
Please.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So here we have the judges' outcome. Drum roll, please. They have decided in favour of the affirmative team. So I'm sorry to the opposing team, but Victor's there obviously celebrating in the great win. There you go. You've got medals being handed over. But look, that's not to say, can I emphasise this, that you got some tremendous comments about the opposing team, and I think all of us will take away some very, very fine points. Look, all I think in the interests of having true debates, true discussions, and hopefully moving forward. I think it was a very wise person once that said the difficulty with predictions about the future is that it's uncertain. So thank you to you, Michael, for supporting us here. But over to you. Thank you again to both teams, and of course to our judges. Just again to let you know that we had Victor Purton, Erica Gonzalez Garcia, Mohammed El Kapaji, Alison Coelho, Jessica Chatterton and Diana Sayed. Give them a big round of applause. I can hear you all cheering in the background. What a tremendous effort. Thank you again.
And Mohammed's medal's in the post.
Mohammed's medal is in the post.
Now, I mean, I'm still thinking about all those great points we've just been through. So there's no better way to wrap up the Vicforum than with a very special musical guest, Miss Amelia, who has been captivating audiences with her intoxicating, soaring voice and special blend of retro-inspired music, big vocals, big energy, and big hair. Welcome, Miss Amelia.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
Hello,
you for
everyone.
Thanks for coming on. I saw you waiting in the wings there. Did you manage to catch much of the debate there?
Yes, it sounded very riveting. I've had some great points from the opposing team, but I'm sure it was a great debate.
Absolutely. But we're here to discuss your work. Now, I did a little research and found you're a pretty prolific writer and performer. But what always interests me about artists is where their inspiration comes from. what are some of the sources that get you inspired when you're working on your music?
Well, look, I've been a performer. I just realized that my camera is very blurry. I'm sorry, everyone.
It's the internet gremlins. Don't worry about them. They're everywhere.
I've had my mother go to the Russian Conservatorium when she was my age, and she came over to Australia, migrated over, and then started a music school here. And I think I just grew up with music, and I was very lucky with that. And then it turned into a love of jazz once I heard not Aretha Franklin, but Aretha Franklin is in there, Ella Fitzgerald for the first time. And then I heard Aretha Franklin, and it got me into soul. And then it started this journey of being in love with that kind of music. And I've been a performer professionally for 6 years now, and I'm very lucky to be able to do it as my full-time job.
Well, thank you for bringing the a bit of jazz and a bit of soul to our production today. Now, Dave Ruby Howe from Triple J said, and I quote, "Enough power to incite a disco funk riot." So, going back to maybe your early sources of inspiration, as you mentioned, my question to you is, did you choose the music, or did the music choose you?
You know what? I actually think the music chose me, because I think I'm also a music teacher. And you find that with kids, they get drawn to certain types of music. And I grew up with classical music because that's what my mum was. She's a classical musician. But then once I got kind of introduced to jazz, there's something that kind of struck a chord in me. So I think that music definitely was what I always was drawn to, and what I've been enjoying and probably will enjoy for the rest of my life, performing and composing and, immersing myself in.
I love that. I love the marriage of education and music. I think that's very exciting. I never really got past my tars and TTs, if you can remember that back in primary school. Ta, TT, ta.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's going on in the coming months? Where can we see and, of course, hear you as well? Where can we find you?
Well, I am lucky enough, it's not officially announced yet, but I'm going to be a part of the Castlemaine Jazz Festival that's coming up in June. And I've got a few other gigs happening. I play fairly regularly at Paris Cat. I'm actually playing there tomorrow night if you're in Melbourne.
Amazing.
And want to catch a jazz show. Otherwise, I've got another band that I manage, and I'm a frontman for, called The Mummers, and we just played Moomba, and we've played various festivals across Australia. So we've got some exciting festival shows happening, which we're very excited about, but we can't officially say just yet. So if you want to follow us, it's The Mummers Music or Miss Amelia Music, and that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. And it's so exciting to hear about all this sort of live performing, especially after the year we've had with the pandemic. Thank you once again, Ms. Amelia, I should say, for being part of the Vicforum this year. And I am very excited to share with you one of Amelia's newest songs. But before I do that, because I know he's going to hover over the button, I just wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about this song, Listen to Me.
So this was actually one of the first songs I released. I've had 2 singles after this one. This one was actually written in response to the plebiscite, and it was released on the day that it was announced that gay marriage was allowed in Victoria, which was a huge win for all of Australia. And so it's about listening to minorities, listening to what they have to say, believing their stories, and not shunning them aside. So I went to Bakehouse Studios in Richmond, and we got together a choir of lovely other local songstresses and vocalists in Melbourne, and I was lucky to work with them as a choir, and we put together this live song of my song called Listen to Me.
Fantastic. Amelia, again, thank you so much for coming on the program. Guys, let's take a listen to Listen to Me.
Thank you.
to me. You know you gotta listen to me. I know that I am too, you seemingly not even worth having a say. I may be small, but I can pack a punch, a human, all I know what's what. Intimidate me all you want, I will not be pushed over. Listen to the words I gotta say. I am a person too, with a brain like you, and a body that shows no damn rules. Listen to the power of the pain. We are sick and tired of your opinion shit, and we're not gonna stand to be treated like this. Listen to me, I'm sending up for being all free. I've had enough of your excuses, see, you better run, run, run. We may be young, but we know what's up. We may be shunned, but we're not done. Intimidate us all you want, we will not be pushed over. Listen to the words I gotta say. I am a person too, with a brain like you, and a body that shows no damn rules. Listen to the power of the pain. We are sick and tired of your opinion shit, and we're not gonna stand to be treated like this. In the shadows for way too long, too afraid to sing our song. The fight is far from done, but nobody's getting tired of wanting our freedom. Listen to me, yeah. 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 Listen, listen, listen to the words I gotta say. I'm a person too, with a brain like you, and a body that shows no damn rest. Listen to the power of pain. We are sick and tired of your opinion shit, and we're not gonna stand to be treated. Listen to the words I gotta say. I'm a person too, with a brain like you, and a body that shows no damn moves. Listen to the power of the pain. We are sick and tired of your opinion shit, and we're not gonna stand to be treated like this. Listen to me, you know you gotta 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 listen to me, you know you gotta.
Woo! Miss Amelia there, ladies and gentlemen. What a great way to end the program. Now, before we go, just want to throw it over to Maria. Thank you so much for coming and moderating the debate. Eva, of course, for having us, and I'll leave it to you.
Michael, thank you, and you've done a fabulous job, of course, but what a great way, as you say, to end, an apt way to end this tremendous forum today. Listen to me, and I think the point that Miss Amelia made about inclusion, about ensuring that we truly are developing processes that engage people and genuinely and meaningfully engage them. Great song, can't wait to have a listen myself again, terrific. Look, this is what the forum's been about, hasn't it ever? It's Cultural Diversity Week, what a tremendous way to kickstart a lot of the sort of key messages here. But if there's one thing throughout this morning, I've heard so many tremendous speakers, dynamic speakers, insightful speakers, informative speakers. If there's one thing though for you that's really come out of this forum that's important, what would it be as an organiser of the event? Well done, Polaron, can I say?
Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah.
that pandemics are good for us, Maria. I mean, it's, said a bit tongue-in-cheek, because I think it's been a massive challenge for everyone in many, many different ways. But I think we are rethinking, reframing a lot of what's been happening. And I think a lot of the conversations that we've given our platform to today are actually genuine. Like, I'm feeling that people actually are saying what they think, which, I come from Poland originally, so we really say it like it is, and don't always sometimes get into trouble for that. But I think it's right. But I think it's really good that we've been able to get all kinds of voices onto this forum, and we honestly so grateful. And everybody was saying yes all over the place, from you, from VMC, getting Brett Sutton on board was really an amazing opportunity to hear what he had to say, and seeing, some of the things behind the scenes. But I think also the key message is, let's talk, but let's talk about something productive. How do we convert all this energy into solutions? And that is the main message that I want to leave people with today.
Love it. And I'm certainly signing up for next year. So please, getting bigger and bigger. Thank you, Polaron. I think certainly Victoria's multicultural communities today, really thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, easy. So many wonderful messages there, guys, and what a show. Now, that's what I believe they call edutainment. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Vicforum 2021, Unmasking the Pandemic, CALD, COVID and Communication. Have a wonderful rest of the day. I'm Mike Loader, and all the best to you.